Hello, how are you? You and
And
you.
you.
Of course, you are watching our live stream, the August
Edition.
edition
How is it
of,
August?
I don't know,
But
of the Wicked
also,
Opportunities
but how
podcast.
how is
I
it
believe.
only August of 2025? Because I've lived 10 lives, 10 lifetimes this year.
Most certainly, 2025 was more trying than 2024, than 2023. No, it all
It
depends.
all
It all
depends.
depends. But um, there was, a running joke for a while that it's like, oh, why is 2021 harder than 2020? And finally, here we are in 2025. I think at this rate, we have to realize
Yeah. Well, I have an
that
idea.
saying the next year was harder than the
Yeah.
last is just going to be, it's
I
sort of the norm.
I
So
have a hypothesis of why 2025 is pretty hard for most people, but we won't. We won't. We'll probably touch on it at some point.
probably since our topic today, moving
No,
from systemic
listen,
barriers to
listen,
decentralized
stop,
prosperity has
stop,
something
stop,
to
stop,
do with
stop.
that.
Before we get into all of that, I think what we really need to be talking about is that Taylor Swift is engaged. I mean,
I can't pass over it.
I really wanted to change the subject matter of today's live stream, but I felt like maybe it wasn't appropriate.
Maybe it does have something to do with decentralized
I
prosperity.
will say that it does have something to do with the idea of decentering stuff.
It does.
And we're going to be talking about that. And I have, like I could do a live stream, a serious professional live stream about just about any topic, I'm pretty sure.
Yes.
And I'm going to tell you that I have conflicted feelings about this and I'm a Swiftie. There's a lot. There's a lot to unpack here. It's this parasocial thing is one thing for sure.
Yes.
But for me, the conflicting things I have, and I wonder if part of it is like, gosh, we're in this time frame where it's hard to find joy. And so like, I don't know, you have like sort of weird feelings about people feeling joy. Not them. I mean, them personally, I'm glad for them, but
Of course.
like the outpouring of emotion and joy for this person that the vast majority of these people have never met, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But then for me,
I was dancing in the streets.
yes,
Yes.
the other conflicting thing for me, as a woman of my age and with my, history, just the idea of like when we just fall over ourselves as women to be proposed to, like that. I get the romanticism of it, but it's very like, especially she's a freaking billionaire, people. He should be on his knees. Let's be clear, begging her. And he does seem to be very much entranced by her. But that's not the topic of our podcast. And I'm sorry
There's a
that
lot
it's
to
not.
unpack there. So
It is a lot. Like, do you want to maybe
use this as
ch
your personal psychology session.
change it for therapy? Um, no, but
I have to use some of these as my
I
personal psychology sessions.
will say that if nothing else, it's been a nice reprieve from the news that we've been bombarded with for the last
This
several
is
years.
true.
But
It's
so,
it's always good.
we like that. We like that. Um, but yeah, so today we're continuing our journey through some of our best work in terms of a podcast when we were walking through 7 shifts.
Certainly very popular and still very, very relevant. Maybe more relevant today than when they were recorded in 2021.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, could very well be.
Yeah.
This particular month, which is the month where we mapped a bridge or created a bridge to the wicked opportunity of decentralized prosperity from the wicked problem of systemic barriers. We could talk a little bit about how we define those. But this particular month, I remember this was what month was this? Was this like month 6 or something like that? One, two, three,
Um,
4, 5. Yeah, it was month 6.
yeah, you're right near the
It was
end.
month 6. So I think it's funny that because I don't remember recording all of these because we recorded
It's so much.
28
Yeah,
of them.
that's a lot.
And that was before we were like, podcasts should really only be 30 minutes. So we went like, I think an hour with these. Like
Oh
they
yeah,
were long.
they were longer. Yeah.
Um, but I remember recording this month's podcast because, and I went back and listened to
I know what's coming here.
I went back and listened to the mapping. So if you haven't had a chance to on my TFSX, if you are a member of the collective, which I hope all of you are, That's our subscription level. You can unlock access to the course, How to Thrive in Uncertain Times. And that course basically curates all of the podcasts that are the focus of these live streams. And of course, the live streams are open to everyone, but we also put the live stream recording in there. So it's like one-stop shopping if you're looking to dive into this topic or these topics that are, again, still timely. We have discussion questions in there, and we encourage you to listen ahead of time so that these live streams are even more impactful. But I went back and re-listened to a portion of the mapping episode for this month's set of podcasts, month 6 of the original collection. And I knew it was the one I was thinking of, the moment I had where you were talking about, you know, leading with love and, ensuring that our laws and our regulations and our governments were fueled by love. And I remember vividly that pre-show conversation where we were talking about, okay, this is how we're gonna direct this conversation. And I remember feeling, and I even said this on the podcast, I was super transparent. I will give
No,
myself
that's
credit.
what even made it even better, I
I
think.
was like, so I was uncomfortable by this. Not that I don't love, because as I said,
Yeah.
big fan
Yep.
of the engagement news, but also felt weird about it, kind of like the engagement news. So both in those cases, I felt a little bit like, oh gosh, I think I even said in the recording, did we take this too far and
Yeah.
all that. So I'm happy to be revisiting this conversation
Far enough. Far enough.
a few years later and say not far enough. Before we dive in, I did just want to sort of like Trav's podcasts when they say new news in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
New
Yeah,
news.
new news. I didn't do it quite right, but
Yeah.
I did want to share that for those of you that are listening, either live or on the recording, we do have something exciting happening right now that we hope that you all will participate in. And that is another crowdsourcing project where we're asking folks to share with us their future's spark. What do we mean by a future spark? Every one of us that is in this field, whether it's our main focus of our profession or whether it's something that we do as part of our work, has a future spark, has a story of why we were drawn to this field, why we think it's important, and how we share it with others, how we tell people that elevator pitch of why they should
Yes.
also embark on a foresight journey and how they should unlock this ability they all have within themselves. And so we're asking folks to share either via a video or written out what your future spark is. Both Nicole and I have shared ours on our LinkedIn. Are you gonna write yours?
I will. I'm certainly going to do a feature spark. So far, I've been just taking in the ones that have been coming
Oh
in. They're just,
my gosh.
I was showing you yesterday
I
a
cannot
video.
cry. I cannot cry.
There's always one of these a day, some video with a young child hearing their parents speak for the first time because they were deaf, but they got in,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
and
That's not a future spark, but yes.
no,
No.
but I was going to relate it to the fact
Yeah,
that
okay.
there's always a tearjerker, some video
Yeah,
somewhere,
yeah,
and now with these feature sparks coming in,
yeah,
there's several times of crying every day
yeah.
because like um they're heavy. They're heavy. They're heavy.
A lot of our work with the folks that we have the privilege of working with around the globe, um, this isn't the purpose of the work, but one of the impacts of the work, thankfully for us, is that it helps put things in perspective.
That's right.
And when you have, folks in war-torn regions of the world saying how learning about foresight and futures thinking.
Yeah, because one came in and it was like, "Hi, I'm writing from Ukraine,
Yeah, I just,
and when Russia attacked, and then I learned about foresight, and now it's helping me to." And you're like, "What is that?"
yeah,
And every day I'm like, "Oh no, I'm struggling with
I know.
internet or something."
Yeah, I didn't get a Starbucks today.
Small problem.
And just note,
Okay, hashtag for
listen, even if you don't have a future spark like that, you can read mine. Mine is more about, how I discovered
yeah.
foresight and yeah, I just don't want to discourage
That's
people
no,
from
absolutely, yeah, yeah.
from
If you don't live in a war-torn
yeah, no,
area,
no,
but
no,
futures and
yeah,
foresight has impacted your life, I mean, they're all valid,
yeah,
and the variance of them is what's helpful
yeah,
because people can relate to different situations, be inspired by ones that aren't like them, be
yeah.
inspired by ones that are like their
Yeah.
situation. Absolutely.
The whole purpose of this is that we want to publish this collection of future sparks, obviously to inspire others. You know, our mission here is to democratize the future and to elevate the field of foresight. And that spark that you provide every day with the work that you all are doing can light a full-fledged fire that can spread in a good way
That's
in
right.
terms of opening people up to the agency to create better futures. And this is what we try to do with this live stream, with the podcast, with the platform of ITFSX, with the courses we offer, like Foundations. Our next Foundations program, by the way, is the Future of Learning, and that's in October. If you want more information about that, it's on our website. But I love these crowdsourced projects. We've done a couple of them. We did an Ask a Futurist, and it was more about sort of foresight implementation. We did one about scenarios, but this one I know already is going to be the best one
Yeah. So
around, you know, what your future spark is and how do you share your passion around foresight and how do you encourage others to pick up this as well and use it in their day to day. If we all, you know, one of the things that we're going to talk about in this podcast, you know, when we lead with love, is what does that look like practically, right? And you gave the example of someone saying online, you know, my small way of, you know, sort of leading with love and fighting against what's happening is when I go to the grocery store one time a week, I collect all the carts and I bring them in. And so it doesn't have to be like these huge, like you don't have to host a podcast or a live stream to make a difference. Often it's in those small relational moments and
yeah,
interactions where we show people
yeah,
this is who I am and I'm going to lead with love and I'm going to lead with the future and I'm going to show you how you have this ability inside of you to be able to create a better future and
yes.
that the ability to imagine better futures is something that's being stripped away from us, whether it's through
Mm.
you know, not being able to have the time to do it because we're fearful of other things happening, because we're being stripped from with stripped of the vernacular. When I look at the terms used to describe this podcast and this particular month, if it were a library book, it would have been banned.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
And,
if you go back and look at the map that we created or that was created for us by our wonderful
yeah, I
graphic
can show it up
facilitator,
here real quick.
um, there's there's a lot of words in here that are getting some government agencies and other companies shut down.
Yeah, and it's
And of course, this was built in 21, but I would hope that we would have the courage, and I think that's what today's podcast is about as well. We'll see before we're done here, have the courage to rewrite this map again, maybe even more forcefully is not the word I'm looking for, but with greater force of love.
yeah, you
Yeah,
could see this is the original map.
yeah.
It still had the Kedge, which is our parent company. If you go through the course, you'll see that we have replaced it with in one of these versions. I don't know which one. It's got my TFSX in it. But I think this is the visual that you'll see there. But yeah, how many of these words are currently banned? And so again, so
Yeah.
just to tie a bow on that new news, I am asking you each personally, imploring you really to contribute your future spark. I really do think that this project can make a huge difference, and we just want to hear from every, you know, every corner of the world, every type of
That's
practitioner.
right.
Your voice matters. Your experience
That's right.
is valuable and
That's right.
needs to be validated. And the more we can share our stories about why foresight fuels what we do and why we think it's so important for everybody to have these tools, methods,
Mm.
and mindsets, the closer we're going to be to a world of decentralized prosperity, which is what we're going to talk about today.
Yes, and so I that wraps up new news. New news.
New news.
Um,
That was better how I did that. I was like, because I was a little,
New
yeah, I was a
news.
little scared at first.
No, you're good. You're just coming out of your shell.
I really am. Thanks for noticing. I've been really shy my whole life. And I just
Starting to break through now.
at 50 something, I'm finally getting the confidence to
Sorry.
decenter men and which we'll talk about today.
Yeah.
Stay tuned. There's
Therapy.
so many good things in this
We're gonna have
podcast.
our own. We're gonna have our own segment. Therapy time. Therapy time.
The whole thing is there.
Yeah.
Foresight is therapy. We talk
You know,
about this all the time,
oh,
actually. Foresight is
that's
therapy.
true. That's
Foresight is therapy. Why is that?
that's
Why is that? Because we're giving people
agency.
the agency, the tools, the methods to to claim back not only their future but their present.
Yeah.
I just you have to check out Nicole's Future Spark because hers is
So
so
good.
beautiful, so beautiful. But you were gonna say, and I interrupted you.
No, it was right along the same lines because I just wanted to say that coming off of new news, um, that something that we'll talk about as we go on in the next few minutes today is this idea of revolutionary love, sort of like Valerie Kaur talks about. You see it
Hmm.
in that you saw it in the map, and you can go back and
Yeah.
look at the map, and her cartoon version is on there. But love is not, one of the things that happens through erasure and exploitation and extraction is that love, the concept of love, got watered down to be this feeling. And feelings are important. And it's not that love isn't a feeling, but it is an action. And um, and that's why I say all the time. I was said it on a podcast, our recording of our Creating Foresight Field Action interviews the other day. That's yet to come out. Um, Reiterating this idea that love is an action. It's not just a feeling. And so when you take the grocery carts back, that's an act of
Yeah.
love. And love is a futures word because obviously it's in the present. But like when we're really engaging in futures thinking that is inactive and empowered and powerful, then we're loving that which is yet to come because we're trying to create something better than what we have here. And so that is an act of love. Futures thinking is an act of love
Yeah.
in that sense. And I think I actually had somebody, I told this to somebody 3, 4, 5 years ago. I remember online, and it became this big thing where, and I don't argue online anymore, but only 5 years ago.
It's not true.
That's no, it
You
is true.
absolutely
I
still
don't.
argue
I,
online.
I haven't
That
done it in
is
eons.
okay.
Haven't done it in
Okay.
eons, therapy
Okay.
person.
Okay.
I don't argue online
Okay.
anymore.
That's good to know.
Haven't done it. But it hasn't been that long ago, 5 years ago, where it's like it was a hobby of mine. And and this particular person wrote back to me and said, like, love, futures thinking should not have anything to do with love at all. It's dangerous. And we've got to separate those two things. And I could not, of course, disagree more vehemently. And it became this big argument online, which is ridiculous because it's about love and we're arguing. And so all that made me do was double down on that.
Yeah.
And I think the
As is
podcast
the
might have,
case.
yeah,
As is the case,
yeah.
typically. Uh,
And uh and and we have to connect our futures thinking to love. If
yeah.
not, it becomes co-opted by systemic
Yeah.
barriers.
So let's talk about
Yeah.
what we mean by bring up the map real quick because that way we can all read off the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So the this live stream and the Thriving in Uncertain Times course that we've built for this year is really a walk down memory lane, but with topics that have never been more relevant, honestly, sadly. But honestly. And so in this particular month of podcasts, which again, if you haven't had a chance to go back and listen, I encourage you to do so because while we do reference the pandemic, and I even talked about homeschooling during the pandemic in this episode, which is wild because at the time I had an eighth grader and now I have a freshman in college. And if anyone starts asking me questions about that, she's been there 8 days. I am not well. I'm unwell. Talk about love. Anyway, but these are all still relevant topics. So in this particular month, we talked about the wicked problem of systemic barriers, which we defined as roadblocks to individual and collective equity and justice built into governmental, organizational, and social systems due to longstanding prejudices, superiority, and fear. And if that doesn't describe our current state of affairs, I don't know what does.
But, uh,
So, again, we used foresight tools in these 4 podcasts to walk us from systemic barriers to the wicked opportunity. Wicked opportunity is based on the idea of complex problems. We really believe that the complexity is not the issue here. It's our outdated mindsets. So if you're new to the podcast, we talk about how we fuel our work with foresight, and we see complexity not as the enemy, but as a platform to create change, equity, and transformation. And so in doing so, we can uncover a wicked opportunity, right? Not in spite of the complexity, but because of the complex systems that we're in. That is a beautiful thing. And if we lead with nature and our natural ability to think like this, we can be successful in flipping these problems. And so the wicked opportunity here is we defined as decentralized prosperity. This was a new landscape of widespread freedom, success, and fulfillment across all cultures and communities due to the bottom-up governance and social constructs of inclusion. Again, we're going to jail. We're going to jail because
there's like
of
5 words in there that
and so, but why are these the words they're going after? Ask yourself. Let's ask ourselves. Let's ask ourselves, what are they so afraid of with the word of inclusion, of belonging? And why should that make us double down on this? Because clearly we're on to something.
Yeah.
Because if they weren't afraid of it, if they are, since they are afraid of it, it means that we're on to something here. And of course we are. So we started off with CLA, and I love revisiting the CLA, especially the visuals that Alice drew. You were saying that you didn't feel like you looked like you here.
I don't. I have a friend that works at or had worked at Columbus College of Art and Design. I feel like it's him. I don't know why. But I mean, this guy's got blonde hair and square glasses.
Mm,
I don't know. That doesn't look like me.
my hair's, I don't
That
know.
looks a little bit more like that.
Mhm.
But there are some of the posters do like.
I tried to make it bigger and now I can't move
It's
her.
cute. I think she wanted to change things up on this one a little.
Yeah, I think after several months of doing this, she was like,
I
okay.
feel like a handyman on this one. It's like, welcome to the handyman
Maybe it's your shirt. Um, but is it a Wicked Opportunities podcast if we're not talking about the patriarchy? It's not. It's not, honestly.
Is it reality if we're not talking about the patriarchy?
It's true.
Yeah.
But
Zero patriarchal central. Yeah.
in this um in this podcast, I do remember talking about hyper masculinity, and we've continued to talk about that over the last several years. And
Yeah.
a big part of this was, leaning more towards the feminine spirit. And again, it's a shame that love is associated with the feminine spirit, and that it presents a duality that somehow that males or the masculine doesn't, doesn't have that
Exactly.
ability, but it
Yeah.
does, but it's just more linked to.
Um, when sometime back I interviewed Rian Eisler for one of our CFFAs. And you can find that, of course, at my.tfsx.com under videos. And her big message is partnership.
Mm,
And that right now we live under is 2 P's. There's patriarchy, and then there's partnership. The opposite of patriarchy isn't for her matriarchy. So we were talking a few minutes ago about
that's funny.
swinging the pendulum.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
And so when a pendulum is really far to one side,
yeah.
the answer is often to swing the pendulum to the other side because, it's like you got to break through, right? Like just incrementally moving the pendulum doesn't really move it away from
Yeah.
the systemic
And
barrier.
it's very much a reactive,
Yes, yes.
which is understandable.
That's what I'm trying to say. It's
Yeah.
understandable. And so like the opposite of the patriarchy might actually literally be a matriarchy, but she's like, but that doesn't get you anywhere. What gets you somewhere is to understand sacred partnership.
Mm.
And it's radical because it's not like, oh, we take what we know of males today, what we know of females today, and we just sort of put them together. It's like it redefines what male and female means altogether.
Right.
I was, as a matter of fact, as long as we're on this, I grabbed before we came out today this book by Sophie Strand, The Flowering Wand, which is and she's got she's a writing fiend,
Yeah.
and she's 29 now. It's ridiculous. What have I done with
Yeah, I was
my
gonna
life?
say, talk about putting things in
What have
perspective.
I done with my life?
We are losers.
Yeah, I know.
Though we
Jeez,
do have
so
a
much.
new set of trend cards at the printer right now. You heard it here first.
Yeah,
So
there's a lot. We got a whole. I'm not going to say what it is. We got a whole other crowdsource project coming out. I'm working on a
yeah, don't
book.
confuse them. Don't
No,
confuse
don't
them.
confuse anybody. But Sophie, and by the way, if you don't know Sophie Strand, you should. And and I interviewed Sophie too. You can find that at
Hmm. Hmm.
my.tfx.com.
Hmm.
But in this book, she's talking about rewilding the sacred masculine. And as a matter of fact, she says on the back of the book, long before the sword-wielding heroes of legend readily cut down forests, slaughtered the old deities, and vanquished their enemies, there were playful gods, animal-headed kings, mischievous lovers, trickster harpists, vegetal magicians with flowering wands. As ecofeminist scholar Sophie Strand discovered, these wilder, more magical modes of the masculine have always been hidden in plain sight. She leads us back into the forgotten landscapes and hidden secrets of familiar myths, revealing the beautiful range of the divine masculine, including expressions of male friendship, male intimacy, male creative collaboration. And then she talks about it much like Rhian Eisler does too with the partnership piece. And she just ends by saying that Strand reseeds our minds with new visions of male identity and shows how each of us, regardless of gender, can develop a matured ecological empathy and witness a blossoming of sacred masculine powers that are soft, curious, connective, celebratory.
Hmm.
It's really beautiful, and of course, Sophie talks about the divine feminine as well, and even on our map, you can see we talked about the goddess being the opposite of. And I know one of the things we talked about here is that, like, when we try to, even in our systemic barriers, when we say, let's elevate the feminine and,
Yeah.
and make sure that we have equal pay and those kinds of things, that women often enter you've said this in the past a lot, women will enter the marketplace and try to act like the patriarchy
Yeah.
instead of us having that decentralized version of what it means. And it's a reframing, a
Yeah.
redefining of these systemic barriers. Because what happens is in a system, when we try to make corrections, if we make it within the systemic barriers,
Yeah.
we only define those things by the way the system defines them. So it's like let's pay women more and get more women in the workforce, but
Yeah.
then they show up as men
Yeah.
or as men as we define it today, instead of redefining or decentralizing the way we think.
Because the systems continue to reward that behavior.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
so we have to
It's
be super careful of that. It's that quote from Einstein, we cannot solve our systemic problems the way they are today
yeah.
with the same level of consciousness that created them.
I just want to point out that another
That's the
example
interesting thing is
another
redefining.
another example of that is here on this visual in the mapping episode, we use the point of impact questions, which, if you're not familiar with the point of impact questions, they're, I think, a really powerful way to do scanning and create scenarios. And in this case, we used it to sort of build out what it would mean to have a world of decentralized prosperity. What would be the systems, the structures, the way that we connect, more tangibly. And in the use question, we answered UPS,
Yeah.
which is Universal Prosperity Services.
Yeah.
As as differentiated from universal basic income or even universal basic services, universal prosperity services changes the framing of that, as Frank was saying, and it doesn't just put something on top of it.
Yeah, if you look at that map, you can even see below the Universal Prosperity Services, our graphic designer wrote from basic to thrivability.
Hmm.
Michelle Shevin often talks about relational thriving.
Yeah.
And so, again, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
We're like, oh, this radical idea of universal basic income and universal basic services, which are really just basic.
Yeah.
And so when we define it by the systems we're in, again, it's like that's a great step forward, but it's still defining it the way the system does. It's like, look, we'll just give you the basic. And outside that system, there's a thrivability.
Yeah. And we're still arguing about whether we should give them the basic.
Yeah,
Because
should you even have it? Which ones would be included? And it's
yeah.
by the system's definition framing.
It's
So
you
that's
you
tough.
you read that beautiful summary of Sophie Strand's work, The Flowering Wand, and I sat here and I thought, how how do we live in a world where that exists in this world at the same time
Yeah.
as,
Yeah.
just to give you a tangible example, and I apologize that it's US centric, but I think it'll still make sense. Um, in our state, home state of Florida, the current attempt of our uh, unwanted regime to control and insert fear is, believe it or not, by repainting crosswalks.
Yeah.
So, in a world where we have what Sophie just wrote,
And we saw it in DC this past
people,
week, but it happens here a lot.
but people thinking about the stuff, and in that same vein, yes, of course, in DC we have the National Guard and all of that
And they
stuff. And
painted that crosswalk in
yeah,
there too.
yeah.
Yeah.
In Florida, we are repainting crosswalks. We are repainting crosswalks for a variety of different reasons, supposedly. But the crosswalks include ones that have a rainbow, because obviously
Yeah.
the rainbow is representative of LGBTQ AI right plus rights, and in this
And that crosswalk is next to the Pulse
right,
nightclub.
in that
Yeah.
particular one was a memorial
Yeah.
for the victims of the tragedy in the Pulse nightclub
Yeah.
that happened a few years ago.
That's right.
Um, and so I bring that back because I think if we say that how we achieve decentralized prosperity, one of the ways that we achieve this, because by definition, we're talking about it being decentralized. We're talking about it being ground up, right? So like we have we're in a unique we have a unique opportunity with the current state of a lot of our world, that things are blowing up all around us. And so we argue that that's a perfect opportunity for transformation.
That's right.
And so how can we in small ways
Mm,
lead with love? And in that example of the crosswalks, it's people showing up with chalk. It's people showing up with,
yes.
buckets of paint and, going back and forth
On
and
a daily basis, going back out
you
there.
know
They squirt it off. They go back out the next
I
morning.
know.
They go
And
out
of
there
course
in the snow.
now we're using
Silence.
and now we're using police officers to guard the crosswalk,
It's wild.
because what better use of our resources
Yeah.
than that? So I think that I think we can lose our minds over this, honestly. Like,
It's easy.
so
It's easy.
someone could argue, like,
Yeah.
what are we doing? Even
Yeah.
like trying to repaint that. But it is important, right? It is important for us
Show up.
to show up and to do those, even if they might seem like
Yeah.
small acts of
Activism.
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 But what other ways can we um practice revolutionary and radical love? Because I know personally, it's challenging, because when I think about my neighbors, my family members who voted for and support this regime, just as an example, not to make it again US centric. I know this is happening worldwide in different aspects. And
Yeah.
I know the political polarization is an issue we're all having to deal with, no
Yes.
matter where you live, right? And
Yeah.
honestly, unfortunately, what happens in the US does have ripples and affects other parts of the world, whether we like it or not. And so it's difficult because I think, easy to fall into, like, I hate them. Like, I hate what they stand for. I hate what they're doing. They're hurting people.
Yeah.
They are they are killing people.
Yeah.
They are uh sending people to countries they've never been to, like, just without due process,
Yeah.
without any reason. They're just snatching and kidnapping people off of the street
Yeah.
as masked men, and you never hear from them again. This is happening in
In your history books, when was
2025.
the last time you saw that?
Let me think. Let me think for a minute.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, but I think it could be hard for someone to say, "You want me to meet that with love?"
It's very hard.
Explain it to me like I'm three,
Yeah.
because I'm honestly having a hard time.
Yeah.
And it's like, I went and listened to the podcast from however many years ago. I'm like, come on, it'll click, it'll click.
And it's not just that. It's like I'm sure many of our listeners and I feel the same and think the same. It's like we see how movements like this get um, defeated. And it's not through flowers and gun barrels. It's, there were world wars over this.
Mm.
Um, and so, it's so easy to say like you don't defeat this kind of thing through voting and those kinds of things. But you ask the question, what are the other ways of resistance? And I think understanding futures consciousness is one of the most radical ways that
Mm.
we can activate that. And that's how we started the show off, really talking about how do we imagine our way past these systemic barriers. And that's why imagination is so, so important. I think it's the most important part of futures thinking. When we think of futures thinking and we're in the field and we might practice this as a profession, we think about trends and future cones and wheels and triangles. But when we're thinking about this as your just everyday person, which includes you and I, it's about imagination. I put up a post not long ago, and I was sharing with you
The video, yeah.
this video of this young woman who is quite amazing. I forget where she goes by Death Doula online, I think, or something like
I
that.
like it.
And she,
I feel like I need a catchy name like that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
We'll have to think about it. We'll ruminate on what our
And I think,
we were talking a lot this week about if we had an AI, what our AI name would be.
yeah,
And mine's got something to do with brown sugar, I'm pretty sure, even though I don't have an AI, because that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother
I
day.
told you mine is Karen Raisin Jello. So that's my. I guess it should be Ken because it's Ken and Karen.
I like
Ken
it.
Raisin Jello is my AI name. But she was saying, and death doula means, that like we have to realize that we have to hospice as Vanessa Andriotti would say, we have to hospice, modernity, right? Like which, there's a whole that's a different podcast, but that's laughing because there's a topic
We're
that
gonna need to do a behind the scenes
yeah.
podcast for the Vanessa discussion. Lord help
Hate the
us.
cinnamon tea.
Ah,
Um, Yeah, and then like Ron said, we're seeing it fighting back. They're shutting down Alligator Alcatraz
they
now,
are.
and they'll
They
open up
are.
another one.
They
So
are.
we're in these precarious times. But this young woman says in this video, it's really powerful. She says, we live in, and this relates very much to systemic barriers.
Oh, for sure it does. I had written it down
Here,
because I didn't want to forget to say
here
it.
we go. We live in a white man's imagination. We're living in a white man's imagination.
We are living in a white man's imagination because today's present was yesterday's future. And the reason why
There you go.
we landed in today's present is because the dominant narratives of yesterday were filled with only white men, technocratic,
That's right.
focused and obsessed white men, largely. And so as a result, we are living in the imagination of a white man.
Right. And I think it's important to say, and I want this to be on this recording. Bayo Kumalafe recently wrote an article, and I can't remember what it is. You'll have to go look it up. But he says that you see this online. You see Frank and Yvette talking about it. You see, Julian from The Biggest Loser talking about it recently. There's all these people online and saying like, I stop making me feel guilty as a white person or whatever because da da da. And he's like, there is some truth to that because it's not about your skin color. Obviously, it is, but it isn't. But it is, but it isn't because whiteness is a system. It's not just a skin color. Whiteness is a system. It's the system we live in now. And you can be not white on your skin and still
Yeah.
be in the white system. And so it's a really powerful article that he wrote. And that's the point. Because decentralized prosperity, imagining a future, this is what she says in the video.
Yeah.
She says, they want the white system wants you not to imagine. It wants to erase imagination because it knows that if you can imagine it, it can happen. If you can imagine it, it can happen. And if we can imagine ourselves beyond the systemic barriers, then we can imagine a decentralized prosperity that is inclusive, that's diversified, that yes, is woke in its real meaning and its
Yeah.
in its basic meaning.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and so that's why imagination is the key. Again, sorry, but I just
no,
want to
no,
finish this
yes.
thought.
Yeah.
If if we're practicing foresight, then we're thinking about trends and triangles and wheels and all of this. But if just you and I, we all own future's agency. It is a biological, psychological, sacred dynamic of all living things. And so to re-engage that and to unlock it and loose it means to imagine a decentralized, prosperous world where all the voices cause us to thrive together.
Yeah.
And that's back to that love piece again. But that's why this is futures thinking is such a powerful activist response to the world, to a world of fear and crisis.
And that's the theme of the entire year that we've embarked on, right? Is foresight as activism, and
That's right.
why practicing futures thinking and sharing your future spark with others
Yes.
is truly one of the best ways we can lead with radical love, and we can help to change what's happening. And to go back to the repainting of the crosswalks,
Mm,
I mean, I just think it's just ironic. It's not only rainbow crosswalks, because even the ones that like kids have created and won contests for, they're painting over, but we know
yeah.
primarily it's about, this erasure
It's erasure.
of these of individuals that think differently than them or feel differently than them.
And keep the thought. Keep
Yeah.
the thought. Let's come right back to it.
Yeah.
I just can't help it because the word erasure is so powerful.
Mm,
That's what systemic barriers try to do. They
yeah.
want to erase imagination. When they paint on those crosswalks, they're painting the future.
That's what I was getting ready to say.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like it's actually very powerful metaphor
Yes.
to, erasing the rainbow crosswalk. Um, and it's not lost on me that a rainbow is a symbol of whimsy and of joy.
Yes.
And who doesn't get excited when they see a rainbow in the
It
sky
automatically
and
starts making you think, wow,
what's
what could be
possible?
possible? Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
So,
So erase that, erase the future.
yeah, yeah.
That's
And
right.
so,
This is your future, friend. You're stuck in it. That's what systemic barriers do. And that's why we have to move beyond that. And we have to have, it's not enough to trend. We have to imagine transformative realities. And that's why these podcasts are so important. The reality we're stuck in right now is systemic barriers. The transformative reality is decentralized prosperity. That's futures thinking.
yeah.
Forget about trends for a moment, if you can, please, and imagine something bigger.
Because again, it's, we have to be really careful. And we've said this before, that the reason that we say, quote unquote, forget about trends, it's not that we're not issuing a set of trend cards ourselves, but it's that by definition, something is trending because it's, largely being promoted by popular media and dominant narratives. And so, especially in our environment of algorithm driven information, it's very easy to fall prey to the hype cycle, and even without realizing, begin promoting again the dreams and the imagination of the dominant narrative, in this case the white man's imagination. And so it's not that we're saying that people are necessarily better than the white man. We're saying that our imaginations, and therefore our futures, should be representative of the world around us.
Yeah.
It should include all the different cultures and colors and diverse perspectives. It should include nature. It should include, all of those elements. And so when we begin to silo and mechanize and simplify, and all of those things, then that's when, we lose the plot.
We completely lose the plot. And look, I could go off on a soapbox, but it's so true. And when you were saying include different ways of thinking and decentralizing, they're decentering ways of knowing and thinking.
Yeah, I think we should talk about this idea, because I honestly, when you were talking today, when we were setting up for the show, and you were like, decentralized prosperity, it's part of it is decentering. And I'm like, huh, I don't know why I never connected those two concepts.
Yeah.
To me, decentralized means that power isn't held in the
Yeah,
sampler.
and something's broken apart in its pieces or
Right,
whatever.
right, right.
That's not the case necessarily.
Yeah, and in the context of decentralized prosperity, obviously we talk about it being ground up, and we in the individual podcast we talk about regional ways of governing and localized ways, and that express the customs. But when I think about decentering, of course, what comes to mind for me is the current dialogue around decentering men. That if you have a TikTok algorithm and a For You page that looks like mine, there's a lot of conversation about women saying, I'm decentering men, which I think is a valid conversation.
Of course.
But to your point earlier, it ends up swinging the pendulum. And so a lot of folks are saying, I'm going to decenter men. I'm centering myself. Which,
Yes. And it's like, and again, as you said earlier, I understand that response. I
yep.
totally understand that response. Is it where we want to end up in the end? Um, no, of course it's not, because that's going to leave us in the system again. So it's
Yep.
like, I'm going to center myself is a systemic response, not a decentralized
Yeah.
prosperity
Yeah.
response. Yeah.
And I think, the individualism
Yeah.
is
It's
a,
being actually right into the hands of,
yeah.
it's just we don't know how else to respond. Like,
Yeah.
what is the third way? What is the fourth way?
Well, again, and if you're again, it's not a bug, it's a feature
Yes.
when you're the average person is feeling like they're constantly being bombarded with fear, with, even where there's not uh a true, for example, source of crime. We're going to deploy troops
Yeah.
to make you feel like there was, and that the only people that can help you feel safe from this supposed crime that you should be fearful of is, your
Dear
government.
leader.
Yeah, 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 dear leader. So, but decentering, that conversation of decentering, you were going to say, I think, something else about that.
No, I think that's really powerful. And mine's a little bit different, but I think all of these things sort of come together to give us a bigger picture of this decentralized prosperity. Um, because that we actually all have been, but you and me and Nicole and Ashley, we all make this, beautiful tapestry of a team that brings different thoughts together, but paints a bigger picture. And what I was going to say, the reason I'm saying that is because I've been on this rant for several years now of like we just have to think about futures thinking a very different way,
Yeah.
because the the dominant way of futures thinking is a white Euro patriarchal exploitative extrapolative exponential tech way of thinking. And our good friend Zan Chandler,
Mm.
one of the professors at Ontario College of Art and Design's Strategic Foresight program, and past board member of the APF, and et cetera, all
A
the
member of the
accolades,
GFAC.
member of the JFAC, and professor at University of Toronto's Rotman School of Management. She's a heavy hitter. She sent me a DM on um, Instagram this past week, and she said, "I just really thought you'd be interested since she's been coming to the transformation retreats and stuff."
Yeah, we just announced that our 2026 dates are available. We'll be returning to Maine to host our transformations retreat. And just so you know, we're making that tuition as cost effective as possible, basically pricing it at cost. And if you're interested, we do have a payment plan that's available if you act pretty soon, so that you have a whole year to spread those payments out, because we'd love to see if we can get even more folks to join us. But Zan's joined us a couple of times.
Yes, hopefully she'll come again. Um, and she was sending me this video of a another brilliant young woman who I think is living in Denmark or Finland right now, or whatever, but she's originally from Kenya. And because of that, she's done deep ecofeminist studies on um, key Swahili language and Swahili cultural ideas of time and future and space and these kinds of things. And so that's a big setup just to say something a little bit more grounded. Um, that she's like, hey, look, the dominant imagination of the white person's, Euro-patriarchal idea of is the future is this time and this space out there that's abstract.
Mm,
And what that does is it sets up another colonial conquest. It's like I got to go out there and
mm.
plant a flag. I'm looking to go conquest the future. I mean, it's a colonial ownership and settler clearing of the future. And she says in Swahili, there's actually two. Let me see if I can remember this now. There is two ideas of time. One is called sasa, and it's this short period of time that is the now. And so it includes the immediate past, the now, and the immediate future. And it's very short. And it doesn't go out as we imagine in the Western view. It doesn't move forward, it comes backwards. It's coming at us.
Mm,
And then the larger word for the future is zamani, and it means this huge reservoir of time that doesn't really have a past, a future, or a present in it at all.
mm,
It's just a reservoir of all reality.
mm.
And so the sasa goes into the zamani and becomes a part of this larger of just like this happened and these ancestors and all of this, and it's not in the past, it's not in the future, it's not in the present, it's just
It just
it
is.
is, it all is so beautiful.
That is.
And so she was saying, like, basically, she says the cool thing about futures thinking in Swahili is that the future is coming into us, into the Zamani. The
Mm,
Sasa is coming into the Zamani to make itself real in the now. But in the white version, the white European patriarchal version of the future, it's a time and space that we're going to conquest.
mm.
And so that's why we have trends and all this stuff and everything. And she's like, in Kia Swahili, they would never think that way.
Yeah.
So you can tell them trends all you want, and they're like, I don't give a frick about your stupid trends. I care about whatever wants to emerge that we walk together, coming into the Zamani
Yeah.
and making itself real now so that it transforms me and my community and everything that we're doing in the here and now. And that means the future came and birthed itself in the now. That is so
Yeah.
powerful. That is so
The
powerful.
way that we think about it, in the more Eurocentric way, also in by its very definition means the future's like it'll it never really gets here,
It
right?
never, it's abstract. It's
Yeah.
always abstract.
And so that makes it very difficult because you're always fighting the fight, right? Of I mean, if you're
That's right.
I hope you do participate in the Futures
That's right.
Spark project because I think that's one of the biggest things that we have to overcome with how people here in the US and Europe and those types of cultures view the future as something that's coming because it's hard to prioritize over the present. Even in
That's
in
right.
individuals that are well-meaning and wanting to create change or wanting to topple current systems, you if you've worked ever for a nonprofit NGO, you know that they are amongst the worst in terms of, you know, always wanting to prioritize the present at the sacrifice, at the expense of the future. Because, of course, we have people to feed now, we have people to protect now, we have people to clothe now. And when you make it that false duality,
Hmm.
that
That's
choice
right.
that one
You
has
always
to,
choose the
you
now.
always choose
Yeah.
the now. You
Yeah.
always choose the now.
That's right.
So again, we said this at the start of our live stream, but I want to repeat it for those that have joined since then, that, we get to decentralize prosperity through leading with revolutionary radical love. And that could take the shape of returning all the shopping carts, repainting the crosswalks with chalk, rainbow chalk. But it's also through sharing our future's spark, which
Mhm.
is the way that we express to others how futures have impacted us, how the ability to think this way and act this way and use these tools has impacted our lives, our organizations, and our communities. That future spark is what we have to share day to day in the grocery
That's right.
store,
That's right.
on the street, to encourage others to explore this innate ability that we all
That's
have,
right.
to create better futures for all. And I really do think that's the key to unlocking decentralized prosperity is to break out of this current constraints that we're all surrounded by.
That's right. Couldn't agree with you more. And one of the reasons I wanted to sort of end on this really cool video from this amazing young woman uh, from Kenya is because Yvette's giving you a takeaway, and my takeaway would be similar but worded differently. And that's just that uh, we're not going to really be able to break free from co-opted futures and from deterministic futures, as Ron says in the chat, unless we're hearing what the future means from all different voices and angles, and then allowing those voices that remain diverse to give birth to a new reality, a new unique whole that wants to speak back to us. This is the way to walk, this is the way, walk in it. And that is much different than trying to like plot out a future and to walk that future based on the systems that we live in now. So voices, all these voices. So could you imagine if instead of the way that we practice futures thinking, and that, this goes for anything that we're doing, but to focus on futures thinking, the way that we practice futures thinking now, if instead it came from a Swahili narrative. So what if the Swahili narrative was the grand global narrative
Yeah,
across the world? And we're like, oh, so welcome to the profession of futures thinking where the Sasa is
yeah,
coming at us and
yeah,
entering us today. And it would just, the tools would all be different.
yeah,
The idea of trends might not even exist,
yeah. This is
But
a
the futures thinking would still remain
yeah.
because futures consciousness, a biological, psychological, sacred dynamic of all living things remains.
Yeah. I think that if you're listening, and of course the live stream is more of a one-way stream. Obviously we have the chat, but we don't have the ability to have a conversation. But if you're interested in exploring these topics in a community, we encourage you to join the Dragonfly Journey, which is another offering open to members of the collective. And every couple of months, Frank hosts a community of practice. This last one, we had a surprise guest speaker come in, which was amazing. And we don't record those sessions; they're not available after the fact. It's for those that show up and are able to make it and create space for it.
Yeah.
But they are the most transparent, intimate, and constructive conversations of these topics with a truly global audience that we host, that we do across all of the work that we've done over a couple of decades. Those communities of practice, the Dragonfly's journey is some of the best work I think we've led. And I would encourage you, if this is a topic or topics you want to explore further and you want to be able to have a discourse with us and others that think this way, join us as a member of the collective on mytfsx.com, and you'll automatically be enrolled in the Dragonfly Journey. And that's another way, if you're at all intrigued about the retreat, that's a great stepping stone to that experience, which is going to happen next year. We're
Yes.
going to continue the Dragonfly Journey. We're going to continue these Wicked Opportunities live streams. Actually, next month, we'll be joining you September 25th. And this will be the final episode, rounding out this collection.
That's right.
And we've called it "Is It Over Now?" And it's I know why we ended on these. It was obviously the way that the collection of podcasts. Um, but yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about climate change, that wicked problem, and how we can reimagine a different future. Same bat time, same bat channel. So if you haven't registered for that, go ahead and do that because you'll get reminders about that experience. Um, yeah, this was it was therapeutic. It really was, honestly.
Yeah, so good. And I know there's other listeners in here, and you're always welcome to enter the chat. Ron's been our
Chat star.
poster child chat
Yeah.
star for today. And I appreciate, the commentary and some of what we were saying. We were playing off of what you were right in the chat, Ron. So whenever you show me these, you're always welcome to
Yeah.
enter the chat and ask questions or just give comment.
Yeah.
And we're bouncing off a lot of that too. So
So we'll see you next month. Again, in the meantime, please, please, please submit your Futures Spark. We'd love to include it in the collection. We know it'll inspire a lot of folks. They've already inspired us as we've seen them come in. So please, 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 I encourage you to do that. And until next month, just keep checking out those wicked opportunities, keep bringing back those shopping carts, and painting those rainbows. And we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
bye bye.